probably found yourself frustrated with bumps and smoothing artifacts.
Today, we'll discuss everybody's favorite 3D art topic, topology.
What? Oh, hell no! Hell no!
We'll find out the root cause for these smoothing artifacts and how to solve them, as I break them down into 7 easy-to-understand tips, including one tip that changed the way I view how to solve the Ngon topology puzzle. So disclaimer, we're going to be talking about sub-D modeling, which is still heavily used in industries like VFX, feature animation, product and visualization, games, and more. I'll be breaking down each tip into a problem and a solution. So for our first tip, let's understand the basics of topology and understand what exactly is smoothing artifacts. One of the main culprits is from ngons and triangles. Ngons are simply faces with more than 4 sides, and tris are just triangles. You can see just by simply adding in either an ngon or a triangle on this curved surface, it immediately causes these smoothing artifacts. But you could take that same exact topology, flatten it out, and you won't see any issues with smoothing artifacts. So the key thing to understand is you have to be careful on curved surfaces. So the solution here is maintaining meshes with primarily 4-sided quads, because triangles and ngons create these visible distortions and lumps. If you have to add in complex topology, it's best to do it on the flat surface before leading it up to the curved surface. The next tip is mesh density. The problem here is simply not having enough faces. The easy way to think about it is the smoothing artifacts will get magnified because they're more apparent on large faces. So the solution here is to increase the density of the mesh so it contains it to a smaller area. So this will reduce the artifacts by minimizing the area and intensity of those distortions. Now you have to be careful, because if you go too dense, it'll make the model more difficult to work with, not only for modeling, but for UV mapping, rigging, animation, and more. The next point is artifacts while using quads with protruding vertices. Now the thing to understand is, even on a curved surface, all of your faces should primarily be planar. As in, if you zoom in on each one of these quads, they are flat. However, if either the vertices or edges are protruding or indenting, that's going to be causing these smoothing artifacts. Now, sometimes that happens from manually manipulating the vertices and edges, but sometimes those happen from modeling tools like insetting, extruding, beveling, and so on. Most 3D software has a function where you can either make planar, flatten, or scale these faces. So you want to make sure to go and select the faces that are causing those issues and flatten them where you can. The next culprit for artifacts while using quads is uneven edge distribution. This is where you have inconsistent edges that cause artifacts on the overall form, corners, or extrusions. Now the solution here is just to always make sure you have an even distribution of edges, and also using those distribution of edges to protect your corners. And what's great about using these for your corners and extrusions is that it gives you complete control over the radius of those corners. So you can either have a very sharp corner or a smooth radius, all because you have those 3 edges to support that radius. And that will make sure that it's not pulling that geometry away from supporting that form. Are you tired of buying tutorial after tutorial, hoping the next one's going to unlock your 3D modeling skills? Well, I'm here to get you out of that loop. I'm Anwar Mohammed, and I'm currently working as a 3D artist and technical artist at Epic Games. Let's talk about how to create panels for your 3D models. And one thing that kind of excites me the most is letting the sub-D do the work. The distribution of edges is same throughout the entire model. And this is going to show you where you have these non-planar faces. This course isn't a one and done thing. I'm going to continue to evolve it with your feedback. So ready to finally take your skills to the next level? Enroll now, and I'll see you there. And for the next one with artifacts while using quads is poles and non-square quads. The problem here is having poles on curved surfaces that cause these artifacts. You can see that there's still quads, but the subdivision algorithm will still produce the smoothing artifacts. Now, the key thing to understand is you cannot avoid poles. Poles are absolutely required for routing edge flow and face loops, which we'll talk about in the next tip. However, you have to be strategic. So the solution is, whenever you have poles, is try to keep them in flatter areas of the models so that pole doesn't cause that smoothing artifact, which is magnified on the curved surface. Now, that leads us into the final two tips. And if you truly spend the time mastering these next two, it will immediately help level you up as a 3D modeler and artist. So this next tip, if you're a longtime viewer of my channel, should be no surprise, but it's localizing your topology. The problem and challenge here is where you need to add in a bunch more detail to a specific part of the model without impacting the rest of the model. A good example is hands for a character or smaller details on a hard surface object. So the solution here is to manually cut in and flow those edges back to where they came from. That way it doesn't flow through the rest of the model and cause pinching and artifacts. And like the previous tip, there's only one way to do this, which is adding in poles. So the main thing is to avoid excess edges to simple areas by redirecting your edge flow to reduce that complexity. And for our final tip, it's removing ngons. The main problem here is that ngons will cause artifacts on curved surfaces, the majority of the time. This happens from either manually cutting in or from using your modeling tools. So the solution here is to break down your ngons into even and odd. For example, if you have an even-sided ngon, it can easily be broken into quads by splitting the faces. However, if you take an odd-sided ngon and try to split it into quads, it is mathematically impossible without adding new geometry. Once I found that out, that made solving odd-sided ngons like 5, 7, or 9 faces a lot easier to deal with. And here I'm showing you a bunch of complex solutions where you can either connect edges, turn edges, use open edges to cancel out the uneven faces, and so on. All these are different methods that you can use to solve the topology puzzle. Now, don't forget why topology matters. I know often as artists, we want to just ignore the technical part and really focus in on the artistry.
What the fuck is this?
But we as 3D artists are a pivotal part in the pipeline. We're either working from 2D or 3D concepts, preparing models for skinning and rigging specialists, getting the model in UV ready for texture artists, or making sure the topology is clean for simulation and dynamics. It all starts with a good, clean model. So especially if you're working on a pipeline, or if you're working with yourself, because just because you ignore the topology now doesn't mean you're going to pay for it later. So, as always, I hope you found this helpful, and let me know if you have any tips of your own down in the comments. Now, if you're looking to learn more about 3D modeling and topology, you're in luck, because I just released a masterclass course on 3D modeling and topology. This entire course was based on learning the workflows and not clicks. And we already have a great community of people that have already joined the course, so be sure to join now and join a bunch of other artists that are learning 3D modeling and topology just like you. And if you want access to the source files from these videos and my YouTube channel, be sure to check out my Patreon. And as always, I have a great growing Discord community with hundreds of other 3D artists, and that's completely free. So be sure to join now. With that, I'll see you in the next video.